In the season of Advent, I am doing, as I had mentioned last week, if you'd heard, a 4-part series on the cardinal virtues. One for each Sunday of Advent, because the readings really reflect those. So just a quick reminder of a virtue. I think it's so important that we resurrect the idea of being a person of virtue. Our Catholic school kids know what virtues are, don't you? Remember the definition of virtue? It's a permanent habit of doing good. A permanent habit of doing good. And that's what's key, is that the doing good is not just something that I think about doing, it's actually like a reflex. That is, the example I like to give is you're driving on the freeway and someone pulls in front of you and slams on his brakes, your first response is, "Peace be with you." If your first response is not that, see what I'm saying? A virtue is that goodness, acts of goodness, become so habitual, they are our go-to response. Like a professional basketball player does not even have to think about making that free throw. He's done it so many times, he doesn't have to think about what to do. That we would be that way with prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Last week I spoke about prudence, and if you'd like to get caught up on that again, if you missed it, you can go to our website. All of my sermons are online. Or you can go to YouTube, type my name in, Father Caleb Vogel, click on my picture, and I have like years worth of homilies there. And if you want to punish your kids, that's a great way to do it. Just play that on the computer, lock them in the room, they'll never be mean again. So, prudence was last week, and prudence is a virtue. It's a virtue of the will, of choosing to do what is right. I'll let you go back and research that one if you want to. Today's virtue is justice. There's 4 cardinal virtues, and cardinal comes from the Latin word for a hinge of a door. And so a hinge is what makes that door open and close. It's that hinge. And if we want to be good, virtuous people, our lives hinge on these virtues. And so today, justice, which we heard strongly proclaimed by the prophet Baruch. What is justice? We love justice, don't we? But what's interesting is if I were to ask you, what is justice? Most of us are like, I don't know. What is it? How do you define it? Most of us know what justice isn't. Like we can go, that's injustice, 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 but to describe what it is, that's why it's good to think about these things. Justice is really simple in its definition. It is giving to another their due. Giving to another what is due him or her. Now I first want to describe that though by showing you how justice is different from charity. Charity and justice are not the same thing. Charity is what we do for our fellow man because he is our fellow man. Charity is I might give something to you just out of the love of my heart. So for example, I might see that you fell ill or you're struggling with something, and so I'm going to cook dinner for you for a week. That's charity. Justice is more precise. It's giving you precisely what you deserve based upon your rights. Does that make sense? We oftentimes associate justice with the judge's bench. It oftentimes comes across as negative. But in the scriptures, justice is a positive thing. Particularly in the Old Testament and the Psalms, the people of Israel long for the justice of God. And what they're longing for is that God would come and give the picked on people of Israel what is their due. Finally, justice may be done. Because the Jewish people were kicked around, their land was taken, they were beat up, that God would come in and exercise justice, that they would get what's properly due them by right. Give them their land back. For example, that's what justice is. It has to do with rights. What are our basic rights? And so justice as a virtue is something that I cannot do something for myself if it impinges upon what's due to you. And this is where justice can get difficult and why it's an important virtue, because it gets us to constantly think about our relationship with others. What are the rights that you really have as a human being? What are mine? And do my rights exercise dominion over yours? No. In justice, we can't superimpose my rights over yours, because I always have to give you what's due. And the easiest way to describe that is this: my right to choose for my life does not give me the right to kill you because you're in my way. Make sense? Because you have the right to life. And my perceived right to live my life cannot take away your right. Does that make sense? That is why the laws for abortion are unjust. Because I cannot say my right can overdo your right to live. That's not justice. It's just not. But when we look at our own individual lives, how do we cultivate justice in our own lives? Because this is so important. Because what it can do is it just gets us to have a balanced look at life, where it's not always about me, which is it's very easy for me to fall into that pattern. I don't know if it is for you. I wake up in the morning and it can be like my first thoughts are, I'm tired, I don't want to wake up, work's making me, and then everything's like me. What a pain, you're in my way. You make me do this, you make me do that. That can be an attitude that we can have. And justice is trying to take that away and say, I have a right and actually an obligation to give to you what is your due. Isn't that beautiful? That my life now is going to be about ensuring that you get your due. And here's where justice, though, it also differs from charity, is that justice oftentimes comes to play in a situation that we don't like. Most of us with our charity, we give in a charity and it makes us feel good. Because we're doing something that we're choosing to do, like I'm choosing this, I want to do this. Justice is because I have to. Because justice requires it. Which is why justice is one of the hardest virtues to live. Because in that moment, I have to shut down my own desire for self-preservation. Because it's about you and not me in this moment. That's what justice is. It's about you and what's right for you. And again, that's why we keep crosses around for us in the Catholic Church. Because that's the model. To lay down your life for another. And the more we can learn to practice justice in little ways around the home, this is just going to begin to transform our perspective on life. Are you a just person? Here's a simple way to practice that. You're playing family games at home, and you have an opportunity to cheat. Do you? I mean, it's not a big deal, right? It's just a game. Right? Right? And you might say, Father, that's not a big deal. No, in the grand scheme of life, it's probably not a big deal if I move my chess piece one over or pick that card back up off the discard pile when no one was looking or whatever. But remember Jesus' words. If you can be trusted in the little things, I will give unto you great responsibilities and great things. The one who can be trusted in the small things is the one who can be trusted in big things. Now, I'm not saying if you cheat at cards that you're inherently a bad person. That's not what I'm saying. But what the virtues do is they call us to cultivate virtuous behavior. It becomes a habit. And if I am the kind of person where, for example, I will never throw my gum wrapper on the ground. I just won't, because that's not just toward the planet. Or whenever I walk by, I mean, I don't know, I'm not that way. I'm like, it's just a little piece of paper. I'm like, I can't. Why? Because if I can do that, then I can do the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. It doesn't mean I will, but it's about cultivating those habits, forming those virtues. Here's a way that I form a virtue in my own life. And this is just me. You can form your own. Now, mind, I don't have a bundle of kids around me, okay? But in my house, where I live, I never leave dirty dishes in the sink. I finish my meal and I wash the dishes. Like for me, but for me, if I leave that dish there, in my mind, for me, this isn't for you, for me, it's like that virtuous cultivation of justice. Now that may sound weird, but I'm like, if I leave that dish, the next time there'll be 2 dishes. And then I leave the towel on the floor in the bathroom. And then I do, you know what I'm saying? For me, it's like, I'm going to have the virtue of cleanliness. And I have to stay on top of it, and on top of it, and on top of it. So it becomes a virtue, a habit, permanent disposition. But I do that so that it affects other aspects of my life. And it's not that I'm a neat freak, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say, is that these virtues are meant to start in the small parts of our life, and they become cultivated so that when the big moments come, we're prepared and ready. So when the gigantic moment faces us, we have a habit of being just and honest and good and able to set our own needs aside for others. And because I've done it my whole life in all of these small and medium ways, and when a giant moment comes, I can stand ready. That's what justice is meant to do. And that's what the prophet Baruch is calling us to. He says, Israel, open your minds. Put on the mitre of God's word of justice. And begin to practice that in every aspect of your life, so that when the big moments come, you're ready. You're like a city on a hill, brightly lit, easy to spot, well protected, and God can just come on in and make his home. So I offer you the virtue of justice. And I know that can seem kind of complicated, but I just invite you, as we continue in the Advent season, to be people of justice, giving others what is their due. So kids, if it's your sister's toy, give it back. If it's your job to take the garbage out, take it out. If it's so-and-so's turn for this, then it's so-and-so's turn. If it's your turn to do something, then do it. That's justice. Doing what is right and giving to each their due. Isn't that beautiful? God is just. And that's a great quality. So brothers and sisters, no more cheating. I invite you to a deeper sense to understand the justice of God and the justice that all of us are called to. God bless you.